Good afternoon. I am Shanice Gonzalez, the Public Information Officer for the Farmington Police Department. Thank you for joining us today. During this session, we will be presenting camera footage from the incident, including footage from the officers' body cameras. At this time, we are refraining from disclosing the names of the other officers involved until they have provided their statements. Shortly, Chief Steve Hebby of the Farmington Police Department will address you. Following his speech, we will dedicate a 10-minute period for questions. For those attending via Zoom, we encourage you to submit your questions, which will be monitored and relayed by Christy Hughes, the Public Information Officer from the San Juan County Sheriff's Office. Please keep in mind relevant to the active shooter incident. With that being said,
good afternoon. First of all, we've tried to address some of the concerns that we've seen on Facebook about the camera angle and about the mic. So hopefully we can have a better experience for you if you're watching us Facebook Live. We are going to release the video, which will play for you here in its entirety, and Shanice is sending it out, or has already sent it out, to media outlets that are on our list. If anybody didn't get it and wants to, just contact Shanice and we'll get it to you. There's a number of things that, as we've talked through the week, that we haven't addressed as much as I wanted to, and so today I thought I would emphasize a few of the things that maybe weren't the number one or number two thing that we were going to talk about. First of all, the victims that were right out in front of the suspect's house. The first one who is shot is Shirley Voida, and eventually at the end of the shooting, she's laying in the street as Melody and Gwendolyn are driving down the street. And it's our belief that they see the body in the street and they're pulling over to the side, that they're gonna render aid to her, not knowing what had happened. And so they actually pull over and stop. They don't just drive around and drive through. They pull over and stop, and the suspect opens fire and kills both of them as they're still sitting in their car. But it's our belief, based on what we can see, that they were in the process of pulling over to render aid to the victim that they saw laying in the street. there were so many other citizens, and I talked a little about it yesterday at the memorial service, but there were so many other citizens in the course of this event that did just a great job. Some of them at personal risk, and definitely it was vital to helping us to quickly respond to the incident. First of all, we had citizens that, as the officers were deploying and the officers were engaged in the final gun battle, come through, they don't know what's going on, and through the scene. There were citizens that came out and were providing blankets and doing everything that they could for Shirley, who was lying in the street while officers were off dealing with the suspect. You will see on the video citizens come out and are pointing right from the beginning as the officers are responding to the area. They're pointing to where the suspect has gone, where they last saw him. They're giving the officers quick updates on it. And it's not just a citizen, it's several citizens that are outside. And this was the scene of a large shooting that had just happened. But they come out as soon as they see the police coming into the area, and they're helping officers to actively figure out where the suspect had gone, what the direction of travel is, and what had happened. All of that was just so important for us as a department to be able to quickly respond to this. Without their help, it would have been a much more difficult venture to figure out what direction the suspect had gone, because he'd left the initial area. So it was the citizens that came out that helped us to determine where he went. We also worked with citizens to try and figure out if there was a second shooter. There were so many gunshots in the course of this, and we've talked previously about all the calls that we received. There were so many shots that it left the impression with some citizens that there were multiple shooters. And so we worked with different citizens to try and figure out what they had seen, and eventually were able to piece through that there were no other shooters, that this was the one shooter that anybody could see and could account for. Despite the very high volume of shots, it all emanated from one shooter. As our officers worked the scene with our command van down there were numerous businesses and citizens that came up and were giving food to the officers. Chick-fil-A, Taco Bell, Walmart, Firehouse, Little Caesars, Domino's, Dunkin' Donuts, but there were also just citizens coming up and giving food and drink to the officers, all of which goes to some of what we talked about last night, that this was such an assault on our community. But it wasn't just the police department, it wasn't just a few officers, it was the entire community that rallied to try and help us get through this and figure out what had happened. We're going to show you the video, and what you'll see is our officers responding to a hot call in progress that they know only limited details on, and those details are evolving quickly as they're responding in. And so one of the things that we've worked a lot on, and I'm sure that other departments do as well, we've worked on it a lot in our county, together with our Office of Emergency Management, is annual active shooter training. So our officers do a lot of training in this very area. Generally, that training is affiliated with schools and in the minds of the public, but we know that shootings could happen in churches and businesses, or in this case, outdoors. And so we have done a variety of trainings with local businesses, and some of those businesses that have participated with us: Enterprise Products, BP America, ConocoPhillips, Kinder Morgan, Williams Production, Prax Air, and all of the schools in Farmington. The school district has been a very big player with us, allowing us to use their facilities to train, so that when something like this does happen, you're getting officers quickly responding. They know what to do, they know how to do it, and they close to contact. Where I think absent that kind of training and dedicated time that the department puts into it, the outcome could have been far more tragic. So one of the things that you'll see in this is how quickly the threat is stopped once officers get on scene. And that isn't just luck, that is a lot of training as well as a lot of bravery from the officers. So I know that our faith-based community has worked with us as well, because we have done training with churches on active shooter training. So no matter what the threat or no matter where it was, we feel like, although we could always use more training, and more time to prepare. We feel like our officers and our department is prepared for a crisis like this. With that, I'll pause. I'll let us get set up. We'll play the video for you, and then I'll come back on. I'll have a few more comments, and then we'll open it up to questions. Okay?
I've been dusting an Navajo. Be advised, this guy is right in front of the church. I see him. Get behind the car, sir. Get behind the car now. Good. I have eyes on the suspect. He's walking south. He's wearing all black, skinny. He's in front of the Methodist church, walking southbound on Dustin. I'm being told he's got automatic weapon. Hey, fight the boys! It's your hands! He just took off, White House, directly south of the church. More shots are being fired. Sarge, stop right there. Stop right there. Make a contact here. Give me another unit to Dustin and Apache. Dustin and Navajo. Right here, follow me. Right up around the White House. White House on the left east side. Juliet, I have Sarge. A couple of detectives with me. Get back inside, people! Hold your hands! A gun! Subject's down! Subject's down! Ceasefire! Ceasefire! Go up. Single shot. Hey! Where's We're 713 north. Do not move! Do not move! Here, it comes right here. Coming. Here we go. 428. Subject is down. He is secured. We need 55, 1018. Officer down. On the left side. We got one hit. Give me a medic here for Sword. Just read. Angel, I'm coming. Where else you hit, Angel? I don't know. Okay. I'm here, all right? I got some another time.
So like I told you yesterday, we'd release, a portion of it. We'll release all the raw footage after the officers give their statements, which we expect to be mid next week. For today, we're releasing one of the officers and then Sergeant DeSenza's body cameras. Some of the other officers were in the training division and were in detectives, and so they weren't wearing body cameras. So what you'll wind up getting is more from in-car footage and then a longer version of the video that you just saw from these officers. Not all of the officers in this case had body cameras on based on their assignments. So the first video shows Shirley's vehicle rolling with the door open. She's already been shot and has left the vehicle, and the vehicle continues rolling forward. The second is the blue van that comes in, and that has Melody and Gwendolyn in it. And you see, kind of what I was saying. They slow down. They're not just driving on their way. They see something in the road, which turns out to be Shirley, and they're in the process of pulling over when another just hail of gunfire opens up. At that time, we believe all those rounds are fired from the AR-15, which we talked about yesterday. He then discarded at that residence, and you pick up ring camera footage of him walking through the community with just handguns. Ultimately, he loses the .22 caliber handgun. He takes off and discards the body armor that he's wearing, and he stands and makes the last fight with the 9mm when our officers are closing in at that stage. You couldn't see it very good as you guys get a chance to review it. You'll see the state police car was coming the opposite direction. Our officers were heading towards the state police vehicle, which is coming back towards us. And at that time, the suspect opens fire on the state police officer, and that's when he's shot. And he continues driving through the scene. That's some of what we were describing, the carnage and chaos of trying to respond to something like this, communicating effectively where is the suspect, where is the danger zone. It isn't always that easy and does take some time. In this case, the state officer got caught in the danger zone, and the suspect shot him. At that time, he continued driving through the zone and drove himself to the hospital, where eventually he was treated. So it is, as I described, a very chaotic scene. It's emotional to watch it, honestly, and I've seen it a bunch of times now and talked about it even more. It's still emotional to watch it. What I'll say on it is you're hearing the gunfire, you're hearing the officer. He encounters one citizen there. There's other citizens prior to that are guiding him in the area. You hear the gunfire, and you see the officer running down the street and trying to vector other officers. So Sergeant DeSenza is the first one that pulls up there. They've driven past the officer, and he tells them, stop right there, let's form a contact team. So they kind of form up by their vehicles, and then they begin making progress towards where the suspect eventually is making his last stand. But it's that kind of action, both from the officer on foot, but from the other officers that are just scrambling into the area, and they see the injured and dead up the street. They're driving past them on their way to this scene, and they are scrambling to get there. And then they get out, they get themselves organized, they go forward the best that they can. You see Sergeant DeSenza, even after she's shot, is scrambling to get back up, get back into the fight, isn't able to do that. Another officer's right there to try and begin stemming the damage from the injury and get her medical care. But overall, like I described in previous talks and at the ceremony yesterday, it's such an unbelievable event for our city. You think of this in big cities across the country, and you just don't expect to see it in a city our size. That's really a very tight-knit community. And so on the one hand, it's just unbelievable and horrific. But then on the other hand, you watch the officers responding to something like this. And Mike, I think you asked, what was the morale of the department? And, honestly, I think you watch this video, and whatever's going on in life, it focuses for these officers on responding and trying to neutralize this threat before anybody else gets hurt. They do a fantastic job, and I'm just, on the one hand, I'm very heartsick over this happening, but on the other hand, I'm just so proud of our officers in our department. And there's other agencies, like we've talked about, the dispatchers, the other police departments that are all scrambling, all devoted to trying to get to the scene and figure out what's going on and save people. And so there's a lot to be proud of if you're a Farmington resident of the department, and there's a lot to be grieving right now. So that is all the prepared remarks I have for you. I will give you just a notice. It feels to us like we don't have a ton of new information for you, so this will be the last press conference that we'll do. We won't do another one tomorrow. We may do more in the future, as some part of this comes back up, or you have more questions. I will always be available for interviews, however. As we go along, just get hold of Shanice and we can set up interviews, and I can work with you and answer those questions. So with that, I'll open it up to questions. Mike?
Can you tell us what perspective we're seeing in the ring footage? Is that from the west side of the street, looking east to west?
I believe that's correct. Yes, sir.
West to east?
West to east.
Okay. And so the vehicles are headed north? We're
going to use a mic so that people can hear the question.
So the vehicles are headed north that we see? They're headed north on Dustin?
One's headed north and one's headed south.
Okay.
Right. Yes.
So in that ring camera,
Hold up. We're going to get you a mic.
thank you. So in that ring camera footage, those shots that we're hearing, is that purely shots that are being fired by the shooter, or is some of that from the exchange between police and the shooter?
So all of that in the ring camera is before the officers are on scene. That's all at the scene of his house, and he's firing with his AR-15. By the time officers get to the scene, he's discarded that and he's walked off from that area. Question from KOAT.
Hi, I just want to be clear, because I know you stated that Shirley, she was the first one shot. In the beginning, there's like a white van that just reverses. Is that her car? And then a red car that's like, which one is her?
So hers is in the first video, and it's coming towards you, and it has the driver door open.
What color is that vehicle?
It's white.
Okay, and that's the one that reverses back, right?
No, that one doesn't reverse.
Oh,
That's in
okay,
the
okay.
second video.
Got it, got it. So in the first, got it,
Yes,
got it. Okay.
yes. So as you can see, like I talked about, I mean, this is a community. People are still living their life. They're still driving down the road. They don't know anything's going on. So you see a number of cars continuing to head down that street. Some turn off, and maybe they were going to. Some turn off because they're smelling that this is a problem, and others are just reversing, like you said, out of the area because they can tell, and they're probably hearing the gunfire at that time.
My question is, how many officers fired their guns and how many officers are currently on administrative leave?
That is 4 officers that fired. One officer, and that's Sergeant DeSenza, is still off because she's injured and recovering. The other 3 officers we brought back and they're on desk duty, essentially. They're at the station. Some of them, that's their assignment anyway, is at the station. They're in the training division or they're detectives. So all 4 are, one of them is still off because of her injuries and the other 3 are back.
Do we have an update on her injuries?
She's continuing to make progress, but it's awful early on that. Certainly there hasn't been any downturn, so.
Chief, we've got 3 from Zoom, please.
Oh, okay.
From NBC Network News, was the subject trying to commit suicide by cop? What is your interpretation?
You know, it's very difficult to be inside somebody's mind, but he is yelling on the ring footage, come kill me. And when he's making the decision to take off his body armor, and because we don't know where he is at the final moments, he's making a stand, and he has opportunities to run off. He does not use those opportunities. So yes, it's my belief that ultimately in his head, he has made a decision that he's going to stand and fight it out until he's killed.
From Elise Kaplan at Albuquerque Journal, are any of the victims still in the hospital?
None of the victims are still in the hospital. They've all been treated and released.
Josh Campbell from CNN, is the family member who was believed to own 2 of the firearms the shooter used facing any criminal negligence liability, particularly in light of concerns the shooter may have faced mental health issues?
You know, I think there's liability, potentially. We're continuing the investigation. We're looking at all aspects of it. At this point, there has not been any charges. There is no focus on charging family members. We're still trying to piece together what happened and work through that. But certainly that is something that'll be examined. And Mike has a question.
I'm curious, when you first saw these videos, and did anything you see substantially change your impression of what had happened?
You know, like we talked about, I was out of town, and so I'm hearing what my staff is describing for me. Probably the biggest thing when I watched it was just, you know there was a lot of shots being fired, but when you're actually hearing it, and it sounds, especially in that first one where he's still firing that AR-15, it sounds like you're watching Afghanistan or Iraq. You're watching sort of a combat. I was not prepared really to see that and to hear the volume of shots. And then when our officers finally do get on scene and we're closing to contact, the exchange of fire and the first officer going down, then getting back up, and the communication among the officers, you know, that I'm up, I'm not hit. We lay rounds down onto the target. Then it's ceasefire, where the officers move. So it was just, it's something, to me, it just sticks with you, the threat that they were under and the calmness with which they dealt with it. Even the officer being shot is still in the fight and still trying to carry out her mission. So I guess I had so many emotions as I watched it and impressions of it, but the volume of fire, the determination of the suspect at the end to battle it out, and the calm professionalism of the officers at the end is just, it's awe-inspiring.
Chief, from Morgan Lee at the Associated Press, what is the position of the shooter as he's firing shots from outside his father's home, in the front yard, the porch, or the side?
I don't think we know that for sure. I think we've seen where many of the shells are, but I think he's moving around some. He's outside the residence. He's not firing from inside the residence, and it could be a combination of he was on the porch at one point and then moves down and is in the front yard. So eventually, obviously, he moves down, he throws the weapon in the bushes, and then leaves the property. So there's a fair amount of movement. I don't know if we know he was in one static spot during that entire exchange. Yes, sir.
From the perspective of the ring camera videos, where is the shooter looking out from that video?
I believe he's on the same side of the street as the ring camera. No, he's on the opposite side. He's on the opposite side of the street. I apologize. That's a good question. As the blue van is pulling up, the van is pulling up right in front of the shooter's house. Obviously doesn't know that, and on that side of the street, so opposite from the ring footage. Other questions? Okay. Again, I will make myself available for you for interviews, especially as we go into next week. If other things come up, we'll let you know that. But for now, I appreciate all of you being here over the last week. You've done a great job in helping us get the story out to the public and letting them know what's been going on. So thank you.